This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV, This Week in Virology, episode 647, recorded on July 29th, 2020. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from southeastern Michigan, Kathy Spindler.
Hi, everybody. Here it's partly cloudy. We already had a little drizzle, and it's 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Still waiting for the Norwegian weather app to come up. It's called YR. And when I was in Norway, I said, what does that stand for? And they told me. But I said, I thought it stands for your rain, because it did rain a lot. It's 27 Celsius.
And from Austin, Texas, Rich Condit.
Hi, everybody. We got 82, and right now, mostly sunny. Was a little overcast earlier on our walk. We're headed for 95, and says we got a 50% chance of rain, which would be nice. And the caseload for COVID-19 is continuing to decrease in the Austin area, and I believe Texas-wide as well. So good on you, folks. And the caseload actually in the hospitals, the 7-day moving average, is definitely on the decrease. So our local behavior is making a difference.
Yeah, that's all well and good, but elsewhere in the country, it's still messed up.
Yes.
Still many cases. And I read in the Times today, over 6,000 just on college campuses, and they haven't even opened up yet.
Right.
And then there are these... I saw something about some baseball teams. They had to cancel a game because here it is, the first games they play, and one team gets all infected. And
they canceled the whole week of games for the Marlins.
It's not going to work out. I'm sorry. This is just ridiculous.
Well, and the other thing that interests me is to see news reports of, now I haven't looked into this in a lot of detail, but to see news reports of, areas that have previously reported basically knocking it back to essentially nothing and easing up on restrictions some, and it comes back. So, I mean, the message is that it is everywhere. And when you knock it back to almost nothing, it's not gone.
No.
And so we're gonna be dealing with this until either through natural infection or through a vaccine, we build up some sort of herd immunity. And I was thinking that the natural herd immunity was going to beat the vaccine. And you can dig back in the episodes and find me saying that, or that it was going to be a race and a tie, maybe. But I have to say that the sero surveys, my take-home message from them is that the accumulation of seropositive individuals is slower than I would have anticipated. Yeah. Okay. And so I'm starting to, and the vaccine development is faster. So I'm starting to root for the vaccine.
Well, it just takes a long time to get to herd immunity. Okay.
It does.
It's going to take years.
Yeah. That's right.
So masking, distancing, restaurants can open, but you have to be moved apart. There was a story here in New Jersey, some lifeguards, 35 lifeguards at the Jersey Shore got infected. Not at work. They all went to a party. Okay. And the governor said, you can't do this, folks. You have to stop it and be careful. This is not a joke. We're pretty low on cases, but you can't just... Yeah. It's crazy.
It seems like if you feel like you have to go to a restaurant, which I haven't done in weeks, it seems like the outdoor option is one of the best options. Everything else applies as well, but outdoors is better than indoors.
I have no desire to go. Do you, Kathy?
No, I haven't been. Rich, you may have seen this too, but some number in the teens of anesthesiologists at the University of Florida also went to a party.
Yep.
And it's like, do your work, do your exercise outside, distanced, whatever. But you don't have to party without masks close
I
together.
I just don't understand it. If you get 50 people together, one of them's going to be spreading virus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Even
Sure.
fewer. And it certainly, there are many, many examples now of people gathering inside in a sort of a party circumstance, and that being an event that leaves a lot of people infected. So that's a bad idea.
Kathy, I had a lovely salad last night of lettuce, tomatoes, and cucumbers, all from our garden.
Nice.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Oh,
Excellent.
it's
Yeah.
such an abundance right now.
Yes.
I went out I went to the lab yesterday. I came home and I went to the garden. I came out with this basket. I said, someone should take a picture of me with these lettuce and cukes and tomatoes. It really
Good.
is right now paying off. It's great.
I'll bet you ate all kinds of baculovirus.
Yeah, no problem. And I feel great today as a consequence. There are bugs everywhere for sure. But we planted a lot of romaine type lettuce, the long, and it's just gone crazy. And it's all blooming, and wow, it's pretty cool.
That's great.
I like that you can make your own food, right? And there's a ton of it too. It's fun.
For the newbies that haven't heard about baculoviruses before, they're an insect virus that infects a caterpillar, and they get left all over the leaves of things like cabbage and other things. So, yeah.
Yeah, there are all kinds of insects
viruses
on these leaves, and some of them come inside with me, but I'm feeling very, I don't know what the word is. I'm not a farmer, but it feels cool.
Organic? Are you organic, Vincent?
Yeah, there are no pesticides in the garden. It's, but the cool thing is we bought this straw hay. We went to a local garden place and bought straw hay, bales of straw hay. So it's treated with salt. No, not straw, salt hay. It's treated with salt, so it kills the seeds, I guess, the weed seeds. And you put that on the ground. It suppresses weed growth. It's really cool. And then you have this soft surface to walk on. Oh, the cukes are amazing. And now the squash. This year, we actually tied the squash plant up. Instead of letting them flow all over the garden, and my wife is looking at all these YouTube videos of farmers, and you tie them and they reach up instead of spreading out, and so we'll see how that works. But the flowers of the squash plant are great. You can fry those, bread them, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, the only thing we're growing is eggplant and jalapenos. The eggplant's not doing so well, but the jalapenos, I got jalapenos for the rest of the year.
Got a lot of jalapenos. Yeah, eggplants are just coming up here. Yeah, I get that you planted some stuff, right?
Yeah, tomatoes, lettuce, kale,
Kale,
Swiss chard, beans, snap peas.
Here the beans and peas didn't do well. The sun, the heat seemed to have killed them. Anyway, this is not This Week in Gardening. I'm sorry, folks. I just think it's cool that you can pick your own dinner.
Hey, we need a break too.
Yeah.
All right. This week, Dr. Fauci, who, folks, has been on TWiV a couple of weeks ago. We had a lot of cool people on TWiV, and we're going to get more. But I just was thinking this morning, just because they were on before, you shouldn't think it's old or anything. There are a lot of past ones that are really good, fundamental stuff. I should make a list of all the Corona episodes we've done in one place, right? Anyway, Dr. Fauci said this week that kids under 10 do not transmit. Okay, so I wondered where he got that from. And as far as I can tell, it comes from an article in Emerging Infectious Diseases. I think, who knows where he got it from. That came out just this week. Contact Tracing During Coronavirus Disease Outbreak in South Korea 2020. All right, so this,
by the way, is a cool journal. I like Emerging Infectious Diseases.
Great.
Another CDC publication. Easy to read, short articles.
The print version used to have nice art as the last page in the journal.
Yep. As a matter of fact, the person who did the cover was an artist and actually published a book, which I have, that's a compendium of all of those covers with a description on each. And she used to relate the covers to something scientific.
So I know the editor-in-chief listens. I don't want to mention her name. She may be shy, but she's been to ASV meetings, Kathy, walking around, and she often writes. So good job. Anyway, this is a study of an outbreak in South Korea. 59,000 contacts of 5,700 confirmed patients from January through March. All right. So this is an interesting approach where you have confirmed patients and then you say, okay, let's look in their families and contacts and who gets infected and so forth. All right. So they have high risk groups, household contacts, healthcare personnel, and then non-high risk groups. So they then took all of these patients and they grouped them by age, 0 to 9 years old, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, et cetera, all the way up to greater than 80 years. And they compared the difference in detected cases between household and non-household contacts across these age groups. All right, so it's a nice way to say who is getting infected. All right. In general, rates of infection were higher for contacts of children than adults.
Boy, I looked at this table. First of all, they don't define in that conclusion what a children is.
Well, yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah. Later on, they do.
They do?
Yeah,
okay, because I don't know which age groups they're talking about, because the differences, they're not huge.
No, they're not huge. And in fact, they detected transmission in about 12% of household contacts. So here, let's break it down a little further. Highest transmission rate, 18.6% for household contacts of school-aged children. And the lowest for household contacts of children 0 to 9 years. And this, of course, is in the middle of school closure, this whole study, right? So the numbers are certainly going to be different if they had school going on. But that's the key here. School-aged children, so it's very high. But if you stratify it 0 to 9 years old, it's 5.3% versus 18.6% for other school-aged children.
Not only that, but one of the things that I notice, even though they've got statistics here that says that they have a high confidence in that particular number, the number of subjects that they're talking about in that 0 to 9 age group is the lowest by far of any group. They're only talking about 57 people, and of those, 3 were the 3 contacts were positive. So it's small numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Comes out 5%. And also, as far as I'm concerned, 0 to 9 on the upper end of that's school age. Right?
Yeah. So their other statement, their school age is 10 to 19. Okay. That's the one where they say it's the highest, 18.6%. Highest.
And that's 43 out of 231.
Yeah.
So that's a bigger number.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I trust that.
So kids transmit. They're infected. The virus replicates in their upper tract. They shed it, and they transmit it. And it's lower in the younger kids for sure, but it's not 0. I don't know. So I don't know where he gets 0 from. And again, this is in a period when there's no school. So if they're in school, it would probably be higher as well. But this is household transmission. Okay, so there you go.
As we've said before, I think there's often, in my mind, let's put it this way, I wonder if there's a misconception that since children, nobody disagrees with the notion that children, when infected, are less likely to get sick. That's very well established.
Yeah.
But that so that what that means is that if you look at the childhood population, you see very little illness. But that doesn't mean they aren't getting infected. It doesn't mean they aren't transmitting. And until this, really, there may be other data out there that I'm not aware of. But this is the first study of its kind that I'm aware of that actually looks to see whether there's transmission. Transmission is hard those studies are hard to do. You know, it's
Transmission is hard to
contact
do.
tracing, right? It's all contact
Reminds
tracing.
me of the song "Breaking Up is Hard to Do." Transmission is hard to do. Yeah, it's hard. That's why in a family sitting you can do it, and that's what was done here. But nevertheless, people still claim that kids don't transmit. And we had a letter which didn't make today's cut, but this lady went to a talk of a professional society. It was a talk given by a physician who said there's plenty of evidence that children don't transmit. You know, to 3,000 people, this woman said she was horrified. Well, it wasn't an in-person talk. It was a Zoom thing, but they had 3,000 people, webinar. And she said, I was shouting at the screen. So people take advantage still at people not knowing the facts, and they say things that fit their agenda, unfortunately. But
well, we're going to find out, I think. Okay. And I hope that when school opens, it would be nice if there were enough testing and contact tracing so that we would get some information when school opens. But we'll probably, we'll at least get on a gross level, find out places that do and don't open schools, whether there's a surge in the overall caseload.
Yeah, there will be, locally. Especially without testing, there will be. And many places are not testing. All right. I came across an article in the New England Journal this week, which I hadn't seen before. I think it was published in July. And I wanted to point it out to people. It's very interesting. It's called, and this has to do with our recent very active discussion about testing, inspired by Michael Minna. And it's called Rapid Scaling Up of COVID-19 Diagnostic Testing in the U.S. It's called the NIH RADx Initiative. Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics Program. What is this? So one of the authors is Francis Collins, who is the director of the National Institutes of Health.
Another is Rick Bright, the ex-director of BARDA, who got shoved out.
That's right. Why did he get shoved out, Rich?
He did something that our leadership didn't like.
Yeah.
He was pushing back on hydroxychloroquine, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. RADx was launched in April. So back in April, at the end of April, Congress appropriated $1.5 billion to the NIH. And within a few days after that, NIH launched this RADx initiative, and its job is to support development, production, scale-up, and deployment of accurate, rapid tests across the country. And so their goal, and one of the goals is to expand capacity so that by December of 2020, 2% of the U.S. population, 6 million people, can be tested per day, to which I say, not good enough.
Not enough.
Not even
December.
Close. Not even close.
Yeah.
And Michael Minna said we could have everyone do a daily test, a bucket test. What is this 2%? This is way off. I'm sorry. So this is where he's talking about in part that, NIH and FDA are not on with this rapid program. 2% is not enough. It's not enough to do anything. Anyway, the article goes through the types of tests, and they do talk about PCR tests and antigen tests. And they say something which kind of disturbs me. And again, in light of Michael Minna, antigen tests have lower sensitivity than most nucleic acid-based assays. Correct. This limitation can be a concern. Missing the detection of an infected person can lead to serious consequences. Not necessarily. If they're not transmitting, if you've got a negative test, they're infected but not transmitting, it doesn't matter, as Michael said. So I think this is, these people need to drink the Michael Minna Kool-Aid.
Right.
And listen to this. Kool-Aid. Although a number of manufacturers are known to be developing antigen-based tests, only 2 to date have received an FDA emergency use authorization. So that's a problem, right?
Right. And they also don't mention LAMP tests at all. They only mention RT-PCR, which is more highly specialized equipment than you would need for the LAMP test.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay. Then they talk about a review process where it's called RADx Tech, where you can submit a proposal and it goes through a rapid review process at NIH if you want to develop something, right? And they want to help you develop it and push it through the whole process. And included in the submissions that they got are lateral flow strips for both nucleic acid and antigen testing, which is good. But it is a bit late, but nevertheless, it's ongoing. As of July 13th, a total of 2,587 expressions of interest were received and more than 600 full applications. All right. Now, they go through a process which they call a Shark Tank, and which I think is a ridiculous name to give it. I will not explain why, but I just think these shows where people scream at each other and throw people out and say, you failed the cooking test or you failed this test. I hate those. I think they're not what we need in society. I think we need to reinforce people, and the Shark Tank is part of that crap. So I really disagree with them calling it a Shark Tank. Anyway, it's called a Shark Tank. And as they say, they're working with BARDA and Department of Defense to get these proposals moving forward. So all that is good, and hopefully among those will be some paper strip rapid tests. But, the main thing I really don't like here is this idea that we're going to have 2% of the population tested. I mean, it's quite clear
4 months from now
that we need way more testing, and many people understand this, and this is not good enough. Unfortunately.
So they in their paper, they talk about as of July 13th.
Yeah.
That seems to be kind of their final draft date.
Yeah.
And our episode with Michael Minna was 3 days after that. And I think that it seems to me anyway, I'm biased, but it seems to me anyway that TWiV 640, the episode with Michael Minna, was a turning point certainly for me, but I feel like for a lot of people in the sort of public perception of this idea of rapid testing. So, maybe they'll come around.
I think it's mobilized a lot more people, as we've
certainly
seen people are writing letters, sending letters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we feel like we have something we can do now, and it's push this way forward.
We do have a page where I'm collecting letters that people send in, right? It's microbe.tv/ I think it's TWiV. I should just look it up.
It's later in the show notes, and my suggestion is to just list it under "Our Virus is Alive" as a link.
Okay, on the side of the page. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see
then
if
people can find it.
Testing letters. Let's see if Google has picked it up yet. Yeah, they have. Cool.
All right.
I typed in testing letters TWiV. So it's micro.tv/TWiV/testing-letters. It's not a great URL, but it's there. And we have a bunch of letters from various people, and I add them as people send them in. You'll see that today a couple have been added as well, and you can use them to make up your own and send it to as many people as possible. Send it to Collins. He probably hasn't even heard the minute TWiV. All right. Another thing I discovered that I hadn't known about, maybe Rich knew about this, the Rockefeller Foundation.
Yeah, I forget.
Plan.
In some correspondence, I mentioned this before. I heard this on the PBS NewsHour a week or so ago. And when I heard it, I looked it up. I think we had just done the Minna episode. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked this up. So this is a fairly robust, it appears, effort by the Rockefeller Foundation involving lots of people and lots of subgroups to accelerate testing in the U.S. And I haven't really looked much into the details. They've got bullet points here. For example, grow U.S. testing capacity from 3 million to 30 million per week within the next 6 months.
That would be 10% of the population, roughly, right? It's
per week.
Better than the NIH one.
Better than 2%. But that's within 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that this program specifically considers the idea of the rapid testing.
No.
The whole concept here, right, is sacrificing some sensitivity for expedience and convenience and speed. And I think that's a paradigm shift in thinking. But my sense was that the Rockefeller Foundation has enough people on board so that they will get that message and look into it. At least I hope so.
Hopefully. So this go ahead.
Go ahead.
This has 3 objectives. 1, launch a plan to expand testing. 2, launch a community healthcare core for testing and contact tracing. And the third one, to create a data commons and digital platform to track all these data, because that's important. And and Rockefeller Foundation, as Rich has a lot of people and a lot of money as well. They can help push some of this forward. So it's good. The more people involved, the better. Go ahead, Kathy. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a executive summary, the full report, an updated plan. Anyway, I just like the line, testing is our way out of this crisis. Instead of ricocheting between an unsustainable shutdown and a dangerous, uncertain return to normalcy, the United States must mount a sustainable strategy with better tests and contact tracing and stay the course for as long as it takes to develop a vaccine or cure.
Yep, testing is key, and we're not doing enough. $1 a day. All right, now I got a bunch of letters this week about hydroxychloroquine. And many supposedly well-qualified individuals are saying it's the key to this pandemic, hydroxychloroquine. And I would just like to lay it to rest here with a couple of papers that are really convincing in a blog post. So first of all, the reason it's in the news again is because the paper just came out this week in the International Journal of Infectious Diseases, and it is called Treatment with Hydroxychloroquine, Azithromycin, and Combination in Patients Hospitalized with COVID-19. All right, so this was done in Michigan, Detroit hospitals. This is an observational study, a multi-center, retrospective observational study. In other words, you have all these hospitals, and they have had a lot of patients come in hospitalized with COVID-19 and treated in different ways. So you take all the data about them, and you take the ones not treated and the ones that got hydroxychloroquine alone and maybe hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin, and you say, what happened? So you have no control over who was enrolled into which kind of treatment at all. So it's random, and it's not considered to be a bona fide, prospective, blinded clinical trial, because it's subject to all kinds of biases. And in fact, I sent this to Daniel Griffin early in the week, and he immediately said, we don't need another observational trial. So what do we need? We need a prospective trial, but in fact, that's already been done. Anyway, so they see a modest effect on mortality in patients given hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. And, the numbers are small, but I don't even want to mention them because I don't think this is a useful study. It's not. And in fact, at the very end of the abstract, what do they say? Prospective trials are needed to examine this impact. Well, guess what? Prospective trials have already been done. Multiple prospective trials in different stages of illness. They don't work. The NIH had one going and they discontinued it because it was not helping. It's been quite clearly shown. And, there are anecdotal information's floating around that it works. It's all anecdotal. It's not working. And what I would like to do is tell you to go to a blog post over at Science Based Medicine, which is called Hydroxychloroquine to Treat COVID-19 Evidence Can't Seem to Kill It. And this goes through, article was published before the Journal of International Journal of Infectious Diseases paper came out, and so it doesn't address it, but it really addresses everything else that's been going on. It talks about all the prospective trials that have been done that show that it doesn't work. The properly controlled trials. The FDA had originally issued an emergency use authorization based on the French data from Didier Raoult, and then after a few trials were done, it was shown to be not useful. They withdrew that emergency use authorization. There have been a bunch of negative studies, randomized controlled trials, both post and pre-exposure prophylaxis, no benefit. And then he goes through this. There's apparently a Yale School of Public Health epidemiologist who's touting that this is it. And he goes through, and I think he does it better than we could do it. So you should read the article. He goes through how he's just faulty, making faulty arguments and misusing the data. And in fact, he says at one point, I don't even understand what he's writing. I can't understand his logic whatsoever. He said, I have a hard time believing that an actual professor of epidemiology at a school as reputable as Yale could write such drivel, which is one of the papers that this guy has written. And so there's nothing there, folks. You can go through the data yourselves. But I think here's the nail in the coffin now. 2 nails in the coffin, all right, which I think are just wonderfully compelling. The first, these are pre-publication PDFs. This comes out of a variety of places in France, interestingly. Do not include Didier Raoult. The first one is hydroxychloroquine use against SARS-CoV-2 infection in non-human primates. Okay, so they look in non-human primates as well as in cells. Okay, so first in cells, they use vero cells. And they can show that if you add this drug to vero cells and infect them, it inhibits virus replication. But if you culture cells from the human airway epithelium, the drug doesn't work. Vero cells are not the cells to be doing this in. They're kidney cells from a vervet monkey. You need respiratory cells. And in respiratory cells, the main place where this virus is reproducing, the drug doesn't work. Okay, so then they move on to non-human primates. They give them drug, and then they infect them. No protection against infection. Now, you may say, well, monkeys are not people, and they're not, but it's already been tested pre-exposure in people. It doesn't work there either. This reinforces that. And the fact that it doesn't work in it works in a vero cell, but not in a respiratory epithelial cell, to me is the clincher here. The respiratory epithelium is where it matters, not anywhere else. So that's one. And then the other paper is out of a variety of places in Germany, and include people like Christian Drosten and Stefan Pöhlmann. Would that be right, Kathy? Pöhlmann?
Perfect. Mm-hmm.
I listen to you, see, sometimes anyway. And here they say they do the cell line experiments. In vero cells, the drug will inhibit virus replication, just as we saw in the previous study. If you put the cell protease TMPRSS2 into vero cells, which is lacking in vero cells, so the entry mechanism is different in vero cells, then there's no effect on virus reproduction in vero cells with TMPRSS2. And they take a lung cell line, KLU3, which is a very commonly used continuous lung cell line. The drug does not block infection. These cells have TMPRSS2. The results indicate that chloroquine targets a pathway for viral activation that is not operative in lung cells and is unlikely to protect against SARS-CoV-2 spread in and between patients. So these 2 papers, if you had these data, this would never have been tested in people. But we didn't have these, and so people tried because these are trying times. But my opinion, anyway, that's it for hydroxychloroquine. It doesn't work. It can't work. The lung is the primary site, and it doesn't work in lung cells.
That's it for about the 10th time.
Yeah.
Yes, but we only reach,
we've been here before.
We reach X people, and so X to
the
nth power will not hear it, and they'll still believe that this
right.
works.
Well, and there's going to be, this is not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, we're still dealing with vitamin C, right? So
Okay. I'll fix that link. Yeah. Okay. Other people have added things here. What do we got?
So I added one that's a Washington Post op-ed that mentions two different studies or reports, models, whatever, about how we could approach normalcy in the United States by October. The bad news is it's by serious shutdown now. One proposal is by Peter Hotez and the other is by Andy Slavitt. And it's called Let's Throw the Kitchen Sink at COVID-19 and Get Back to Normal by October. And Andy Slavitt is a former healthcare official in the Obama administration. And Peter Hotez has been on TWiV, professor and dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. And they say things like everything could open back up. Schools, in-person voting, sports, everything. Hotez wondered whether we could even launch a college football season or the NFL.
Oh, come on, Hotez.
Well, anyway, but the thing is, we know that this is not going to happen. But he says, after a few weeks, what would happen is what happened in other countries. The virus spread would plummet. And then contact tracing becomes feasible and rational and so forth. But so that is rather sobering because I'm pretty sure that that's not going to happen. So that means that we're not going to ever get back to a better situation if we don't do something really extreme like this.
The thing is that you couldn't do it because you can't just there would be people that still have to work. Virus would still be circulating. And anyway, it's not even necessary. We have had so many letters from listeners in different countries who tell us we didn't have to completely shut down. We did masking and distancing and selective shutting down, and that controls it. You don't have to shut everything down. I don't understand where people are getting this idea from. It's not necessary. Absolutely not.
Well, I think at the levels that we're at now, I think something pretty serious would have to happen to get things to the point where distancing and masking would be sufficient.
Yeah.
Well, going on the local experience here, well, we aren't completely shut down. Okay. Basically, restaurants are at half capacity. Gatherings are discouraged. Parks are closed. Bars are closed. Masking and etc. But it's not. You can pretty much. You can have a life. Okay, you can go to a restaurant if you absolutely. If you can't live without that. And people are going to work. I go out and the traffic is as lousy as ever.
Really?
And under those circumstances, we have cut the caseload almost in half over the last couple of weeks, and it's still going down. Okay, so I think reasonable measures could bring this down to a reasonable place.
Yeah.
And if we can ramp up testing and et cetera, it'll help. We'll work our way through this. To me, it's still the biggest unknown is school. And we're struggling with that here right now. All of the local K through 12, I don't know if all of the local K through 12s are starting online only. So.
Okay. Lamp. Anybody?
Okay. So the next story was sent to me by Christiana, my colleague. It's a Wired article about Racine, Wisconsin firefighters doing lamp tests. And this is just a really cool story. So one of the Racine firefighters is the brother of a researcher at Cornell Medical in New York City, Weil, and figured out that these firefighters, a lot of time during the day, they're just waiting for something to happen. And so it's been a while since I read the original article, but they got some big unused space and converted it to a laboratory and taught them how to pipette very carefully so that they could do these lamp tests. And LAMP tests are not paper strip tests, but they are using saliva. And so they're pretty rapid. They're lower tech than the RT-PCR. And so they're using it to as a surveillance kind of at a population level within the Racine City community. And I think we've mentioned LAMP before, but Rich took a deeper dive into it when I had questions about it. So maybe, Rich, you want to talk a little about LAMP?
I forget what LAMP stands for.
Oh, it's here. Loop-mediated isothermal amplification.
Okay. So this is the protocol, if you like, in a general sense, that's used by the Abbott ID Now machine. Okay. So out of interest, I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes on this, okay, to give people a little more insight. And we can put a link to this video.
Yeah, this YouTube is just perfect because I looked at some static pictures online and I couldn't figure out why you were using an RNA template with a DNA polymerase, but it's because the static figures weren't very well done.
So we talk a lot about PCR tests, okay, which is the gold standard. And there are a number of laboratories that have developed these tests. And PCR, for the newbies out there, PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. And it's a method it's a Nobel Prize winning method from, it was, I was on sabbatical. It was 1986 when this came out, 1985, 86. It's a technique for detecting very small quantities of nucleic acid, and the way the detection is done actually is to amplify those by using a DNA polymerase to make more copies, and they use small oligonucleotide primers to give the polymerase a start on a specific region of DNA. I can't do without going into a lot of detail. I can't give it much more except to say that in standard PCR, this involves making hybrids of primers and nucleic acids. And then when you do the amplification, it gives you a double-stranded DNA molecule, which has to be melted to make single-stranded. And that's melting is a word we use to describe the fact that if you heat up a double-stranded nucleic acid, it comes apart into single strands. And then you have to reanneal it by cooling it down to a certain temperature with new primers, and then do the polymerase reaction again at an intermediate temperature. So you're talking about 3 different temperatures. The melting temperature is near boiling. The annealing temperature, which is important depending on what primers you have, is somewhere around, I forget, some lower temperature.
Yeah, I think you kind of want it around 60-ish.
Yeah, and what's the polymerization temperature? I forget.
Around 70, 72.
Around 70, okay? So that requires a machine that holds a whole bunch of little tubes that in a programmable fashion can go through all of these temperatures. That's why it's called a thermocycler. Okay. And it goes through rounds of this. Each round gives you one round of amplification. That's why we talk about cycles and cycle threshold. And so each round doubles the amount of nucleic acid you have, as Daniel described the other day. And so the gold standard machines do this, and then there's a way of monitoring how much nucleic acid there is using a fluorescent probe that goes along with that, which adds even another level of sophistication to the machine. Okay, so there's this other technique that that the Abbott ID Now machine works. That's called LAMP amplification, and that is what is described as isothermal. It can be done at one temperature. And look, I didn't understand it. Okay. And looking at this video, I now understand it more or less. Importantly, it replaces the melting steps with a polymerase that is a strand separating polymerase. So as it polymerizes, it peels off the non-template strand, okay? So that you don't need the high temperature to melt the strands. The other thing that it does is that it introduces early in the process hairpin ends. So these molecules are self-priming. You don't need to anneal new primers every time. They got hairpin ends that snap back and cause self-priming. And for the aficionados out there, it's just adeno-associated virus rolling hairpin replication that results in big, long concatemers. And one of the confusing things for me early on is that there's a step involving what are called forward and backward internal primers, okay, which the products of that reaction you never see again later on once you've made the initial hairpin structures. And I realized after a while, and nobody ever says this, and it's really annoying, I realized after a while that whole reaction is only there to do the strand separation for the first round of priming to generate the hairpin molecules. Okay. Once you generate the hairpin molecules, they're self-priming, and that'll just go on forever. And then, of course, there's what they don't say is there's some sort of fluorescent probe involved in this as well. So that's isothermal PCR, and you can look at the video. And so it's a lot easier. It's a simpler machine. You can just mix all the reagents together and stick them in the machine and cook it at one temperature and let it go. And these guys in this, I'm sorry, this is really interesting, but these firemen are breaking all of the rules.
Yep. They are.
If I understand this correctly,
they
have a totally homebrew test.
Yep. Oh, they know that, actually. They know that.
Yeah, they know that.
And they say that this is not approved, and we can't tell people. But if someone is positive, they say you have a result of potential clinical significance, and they make them go get tested, basically.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. There's a second thing. After I watched this video again this morning, it led into a webinar. And LAMP evidently was developed in 2000. So it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And there's a chart that I've been trying to put in, but haven't been able to, but it compares PCR to LAMP. PCR typically takes greater than an hour, and the LAMP takes somewhere on the order of 30 minutes. Typical yield is 10 to 20 milligrams from LAMP compared to 0.2 milligrams from PCR. And so that makes it amenable to visual detection based on turbidity or other things. And it's tolerant to some inhibitors that PCR is sensitive to. PCR can be multiplexed, but LAMP is difficult to multiplex. But so it's just a simpler method. And that was the other thing that this webinar said. Instead of being exponential, the growth is factorial. So I thought that was cool.
You know what factorial is, folks, right?
Yes.
N factorial. 5 factorial would be like 5 times 4 times 3 times 2.
Right. So
I thought Daniel's discussion last week that dropped on Sunday about this whole thing was really good, and bringing up the paper that assessed the sensitivity of the Abbott ID test, the Abbott ID Now test, and said, it's not nearly as sensitive as the gold standard PCR test. And everybody said, okay, well, the heck with that. And now that needs to be revisited, okay, with this new concept.
Well, Minna said the same thing. He said we all trashed it initially, but it really doesn't matter because what we want to know is the highest shedding people are going to be positive because they're transmitting. That's just the beauty of it, right?
Right.
Okay. Anything else before?
I had one follow-up, and that's when you're describing to the listeners about the different biosafety levels, laboratories, BSL 2, 3, and 4. And I just wanted to make a point that for a particular pathogen, it's recommended to be worked at a particular level in a document called the BMBL. and that's put together by the CDC and the NIH. But those are recommendations, and local biosafety committees can do risk assessments that can then alter what the recommendations are. I think in general, local committees are averse to doing that. But it's also the case that in different countries, things are at different levels. And don't quote me on this, but I think that dengue virus is level 2 in the US, and I think it's level 3, at least in some other countries. Whereas West Nile virus is level 3 in the US, and I think it's level 2 elsewhere. And so sometimes it's dependent on factors like whether the vector is endemic in a particular country. And so if the pathogen is already out there and spreading, then maybe it would be rated at a lower level. And of course, things also play into it, like whether there's a therapeutic or a vaccine or things like that. So,
and all this is going to change over time as well.
Correct.
Well, it could.
It can.
The West Nile, a lot of people complain about it being BSL-3 in the U.S. because it's a mosquito-transmitted virus. If you're working with it in a lab at BSL-2, what's the issue, right?
Right.
It's not like a respiratory transmitted virus. But anyway, so I think the reason is that in the 50s, some experiments were done to inoculate people with cancers with West Nile virus, and a good percentage of them got neurological disease. And so based on that, they said, we can't let people work on this at BSL-3, but that was just, you're sticking wild-type virus right into people. Anyway, that won't change, and I'm assured it won't change in the U.S. despite, anyone objecting. Okay, some email. So Alex wrote and sent basically links to what we've talked about. Over 150 medical experts urge complete shutdown. All right, couple of links to that. What do you think about this? Thanks so much for your podcast. And again, I just don't think we need to shut down completely. I think
I agree with you, Vincent. I don't think we need to. I think we need the citizenry to cooperate with common sense measures to bring this under control, and we need testing and contact tracing.
Yeah,
right.
And then let me just take quickly the next one. Doug sends us a link to TWiV in USA Today, and it's a quote: "Whether you're infectious or not depends on how much your body is producing. As someone is falling ill, the virus reproduces incredibly quickly, so they wouldn't stay at low levels for more than a few hours." Minna said on a recent This Week in Virology podcast. So Michael Minna quoted from This Week in Virology. So thank you, USA Today. In the
there was
past,
also, go ahead.
Past,
I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was also coverage in the New York Times in an article about dance by Gia Corliss.
Someone said that.
Basically said the same thing.
Yeah.
Check out what's on TWiV, Michael Minna, and his op-ed.
And she wondered whether the TWiV hosts would know who Alvin Ailey was. And I can assure her that I have seen Alvin Ailey in action.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, there was an amazing dance that I believe it was Alvin Ailey called Caught. Okay. Have you seen this? It's done with a strobe light, in a fashion where it looks as if the guy's floating, because his dance is timed to the light such that every time the light flashes, he's off the floor.
Oh, cool.
Okay, and it looks like he's floating around the stage. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Someone sent that article, but I forgot what I did with it. I thought I had brought it up to everyone, but apparently
I think I put it in Slack.
It's in Slack.
Yeah, I know, but before that, someone had emailed it to TWiV, but it was last week, and I thought I had put it in an email, but I can't find it. But anyway, yeah, that's very nice. I think it's great that we're getting this kind of coverage. I've always wondered why we didn't before, because we put out good stuff. But it takes a pandemic, I guess,
Well, I think it's just wonderful that we've got the dance critic from the New York Times listening to TWiV. That's great. Big shout out, hiya.
But, Zimmer knew of us years ago, and he never bloody mentioned us in the New York Times. Why not? Why couldn't you? Do you think it's going to take away from your listenership? I mean, I think people are just very playing their own stuff close to the heart, to the chest, or whatever the thing is.
We ought to come up with the New York Times dance critic's name to show.
Oh, I did. I said it's Gia Corliss.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm maybe massacring the pronunciation, but that's how I would say it.
All right. Kathy, can you take Rob?
Rob writes, Dear like-minded pedants, I'm a retired internet architect. It's 20C and breezy here in Berkshire, England. I have a son who is a research immunologist at the NIH working on T-cell receptors, NK cells, etc. A while back, he said I should listen to something called TWiV with John Udell, as there was some very clear descriptions of how parts of the immune system work, which I would probably understand, and my son and I might then be able to have more than a 3-word conversation about his research. That's a work in progress, but I did become fascinated by virology, and since then I've been a regular listener to TWiV. I listen in the car, when I'm cooking, when I'm cutting the grass, but almost never have a screen in front of me at the time. So I would politely ask that you maintain the verbal descriptions of everything you cover in your podcast, and don't start to rely on sharing images on Zoom, which recently you seem to be doing more of. Being retired, I just don't have the time to sit down and watch several hours of TWiV a week, and I would hate to miss it, a beacon of light in the murk of misinformation. Keep up the great science and scientific method.
You're retired and you don't have the time? I don't get that.
No, but I agree, because I still listen. And then you guys talk about showing something or something, and then I have to stop, make a note of where I want to go look at in the YouTube. So we could do a better.
I think we explain
verbal description.
I think we explain it.
No, like
the
mice. Something about the mice, or we just need to give a little bit more verbal description.
I agree,
like describing a comic strip.
But I do not think that we are relying on the images. I have never done that. Even before video, whenever someone would say, "Look at Figure 1," I would say, "Nobody can look at Figure 1. Describe it." So I agree with the sentiment, but I don't think that we're really relying on images. In fact, so far today, I've forgotten to show any of the papers.
Well, it's good to have the heads up. We'll pay attention.
Yeah, we'll be reminded to do that.
Yeah.
P.S. As a newbie, could you explain how you can have a single R0 for a virus independent of the society in which the virus exists? Surely the value is different for a respiratory virus, say, in a society where people greet each other by kissing on both cheeks, compared to one in which people bow a meter or so apart. Or is it a post hoc average of all societies and therefore wrong in any particular society?
You're right on the money. Okay. It's not a fixed number.
Well, you can't do the real R0 is. It's independent of everything. You do it early in an outbreak where there's no mitigation, and it's a fundamental property of the virus. Yes, but you're right. Then when you screw around, it's no longer an R0, right? That's what you told us early on, Rich.
Yeah, but I mean, he makes a point that I'd have to think about this and reconsider it. That even that initial R0 in 2 wildly different cultures, might be different.
Maybe.
Okay, but it is true. What we said early on, and I got this from somebody else's paper, is that yes, early before any mitigation procedures, there is something that is at least close to an R0. Okay, that is something that is an intrinsic property of the virus in a naive population that's not paying any attention. And I can imagine that there would be a variance in that. But that as time goes on and you gain some level of infection in the population, and the population also reacts to the virus, you get I think they called it an RE, an effective reproductive number. Okay. And that differs wildly depending on the circumstances. And in fact, then you introduce stuff like vaccination, and that drives it down to something less than 1. That's another RE.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, this kissing one versus two cheeks, but in practical terms, I don't know how much it matters. Really, I don't think we know. I think we'll get an epidemiologist back on at some point, and we should ask them this because
Yes.
we haven't done that.
Importantly, Rob, you are understanding correctly what's going on. Okay. And it's just a matter of applying different definitions, but you understand quite correctly that our behavior influences the reproductive number. There is part of the reproductive number is an intrinsic property of the virus. Okay. Different viruses spread with different efficiencies. Okay. But our behavior also influences how any given virus spreads under different circumstances. And, I'm reading The Great Influenza. Vincent, do you know what the reproductive, whether it seems to me that in the description that I'm seeing, this is in not a scientific manuscript, but it sounds to me like the 1918 flu, the spread of that was explosive relative to this. But, it's only been 6 months for this. But do you know what the reproductive number or capability, put it that way, is of flu relative to the coronavirus?
I do. I have it. I just opened my lecture.
Okay.
Lecture number 12, Infection Basics, reproductive number of Spanish flu. Let's see. How do I read this? It looks like about, so SARS-CoV-2, the range was like 2 to 3, and Spanish flu is like around 2.
Okay.
Chickenpox is like 9. This is
probably 9. A matter of, excuse me?
Chickenpox is 9, measles is 15.
Whoa.
So, okay, here we go. Influenza, 1918, 2.4 to 5.4. 1957, 68 pandemics, 1.8. 2009 pandemic, 1.47. Ebola virus, 1.3 to 1.8.
And once again, for the newbies, that number is basically on average, how many people one person infects when they're sick, right?
Yep. On average, that's right.
On average.
Yeah, so if you say it's 2...
Whoa, I didn't realize chickenpox was that high. That's amazing.
Yep, that's why when kids go to school, they can really infect a lot of other kids.
And who's the winner there? What was measles? Measles is always described to me as one of the worst.
Measles is the winner. It's like 15.
Yeah,
of course, with vaccination, it's no longer, as you say, but that's before vaccination, yeah.
Yeah, one of my measles buddies, the way he described it to me is if you got a room full of people and somebody with a measles infection just walks through the room, everybody's infected.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking for, Rich sent us a series of articles from Cell a while back, or maybe it was Cell Host and Microbe, that had a really good one about R0. And that's the only one I was able to read. And now, of course, even though I feel like I'm fairly organized in how I've organized incoming stuff about coronavirus, I can't find it. But if Rich or I come up with that, we might be able to put it in the show notes later.
I like Vincent's lecture notes there. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rich, can you take the next one?
Joseph writes, "Hello, TWivers. I'm an undergraduate microbiology and chemistry major at the University of Michigan." Would that be Ann Arbor, Kathy?
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to microbiology and chemistry major. So this is going to be pretty close to you, right, Kathy?
Should be. Well, that's why at the end of it, I recommend that he sign up for Microbiology 415 for winter of 2021.
Okay. I wanted to inform you of a very good interview with Wuhan virologist Batwoman Zheng Li, in reference to your recent discussion about Wuhan virology in TWiV 645. I have linked below in a recent interview in Science Mag about her side of the story. She totally refutes the administration's logic and reasoning about the origin of SARS-CoV-2 outbreak in Wuhan. Quote, in her written answers to Science, she explained in great detail why she thinks her lab is blameless. Wuhan Institute of Virology has identified hundreds of bat viruses over the years, but never anything close to SARS-CoV-2, she says. Although much speculation has centered on rat G13, the bat virus that most closely resembles SARS-CoV-2. Differences in the sequences of the two viruses suggest they diverge from a common ancestor somewhere between 20 and 70 years ago. She notes that her lab never cultured the bat virus, making an accident far less likely, end quote. Thanks for everything and stay safe. And links to the interview.
It's good. It's good.
Look, there is a deliberate effort by officials in our country to demonize the Chinese and deflect blame from our own faults in this, and don't believe a word of it. I'm sorry. It's disgusting.
Just recently,
so annoying.
The president called it the China virus.
Every time.
It's ridiculous.
If you call it SARS-CoV-2, he'll correct you and say it's the China virus.
Moron. Sorry, folks. Moron. It's not the China virus.
Absolutely.
And of course, there are people who say for many reasons why she's wrong, but she's not. She's right. And as Ian Lipkin said, the virologists there are very, very honest and good workers. So there's no reason not to believe her. And as I said before, when this is over, I'll go to Wuhan. I'll take any of you guys with me, and we'll do a TWiV with her, and we'll find out.
Yeah, I remember early on in this where we all said we would go to Wuhan.
I still go right now.
Mm-hmm. The paper that he linked to is by John Cohen, and the headline is "Trump owes us an apology. Chinese scientist at the center of COVID-19 origin theory speaks out."
And listeners, remember that John Cohen wrote in a few weeks ago. He likes TWiV, and he wrote a couple of nice letters. So there you go. All right. Next one is from Joe. I'm a new listener to TWiV and other shows. After listening to 640 with Michael Minna, I've contacted over 300 personal contacts, elected officials, and public health organizations, including all the state's epidemiologists and all the state's PTA offices, entitling my emails and correspondences with, quote, paper strips printed with monoclonal antibodies for fast, frequent, cheap testing. We can open our economy, our schools safely, and linking the TWiV show, the New York Times opinion, and the MedCram episode covering this topic. I've included the on-point quotes from Malcolm Gladwell and Dr. Roger Sehult from MedCram. Even before 640, I found your discussion so helpful that I've shared TWiV and Microbe TV links with my contact circles. Dr. Griffin's weekly contributions help me become both less distressed about yet more respectful of the consequences of infection. Thank you for all your work. I suspect that there are many like me, a mostly silent but highly appreciative audience, busily learning from and sharing the information and ideas from Microbe TV podcasts and video casts. Jocelyn is a mother of two, a former tax consultant, and a certified pickleball instructor.
And I had to look it up. Pickleball is a paddleball sport that combines elements of tennis, badminton, and table tennis for 2 or 4 players with solid paddles and a perforated polymer ball over a net.
Yeah, they have cool. they have pickleball at the local YMCA. I've been tempted to join. It is clearly an old retired guy's activity. Well, no, I think it's for everybody, but old retired guys are perfect for it. Looks like good fun, actually.
So these are some nice words. These are people you could write to. I've put her letter in the the testing letters page. These are some people you could write to in your own locale, okay? And some of her wording is good. I would actually leave out monoclonal there. I would just say printed with antibodies because I don't think you need monoclonal. It just might confuse some people. But that's great. Thank you, Jocelyn. Kathy.
John writes, the Michael Minna episode was, as you say, a potential game changer. It moved me to forward an email to my 40-plus friends who follow podcasts to point them all at the proposed approach. It also moved me to email my Congresswoman, Anna Eshoo, who apparently is among the more receptive to hear this message. Please feel free to add my letter to your collection. I'm hopeful TWiV listeners and multipliers might affect change. The possibility is inspiring and a reason for hope. Keep it up. And then
That's the letter.
that's the letter, the text
Yeah.
of the letter. P.S. I just called and left a message about this at your district office. So not only did he send the letter, but he followed up by phoning Congresswoman Eshu's office to say, check out this letter.
Yeah.
Do either of you watch network news?
No.
I don't. I just watch NewsHour because I'm wondering how much popular press this is getting.
All right, listen. Ian Lipkin was on CNN last week. He should have mentioned this. He didn't, because he doesn't listen to bloody TWiV. And he should know about this anyway. I mean, this is an example of lack of connectivity that's crucial. He could have reached a lot of people by doing that. Anyway. Sorry. Rich, you're next.
How do I pronounce this name?
Oh, they give a thing at the bottom. My name is easy to pronounce. See it? Shisia.
Shisia. Okay. I hope that's close. Shisia writes, Dear TWiV team, I am a University College London PhD student working with Alex Segal at the Africa Health Research Institute in sunny Durban, South Africa. Even though we're in the middle of winter, the temperature is a comfy 22 degrees C in daytime. Since I'm doing my PhD on tuberculosis antibodies, I found TWiV immensely helpful in trying to keep up on general virology. I'm excited to have jumped on the coronavirus research wagon. My PI is leading a study on the earlier immune response in COVID in patients in Durban hospitals, and I've recently started doing ELISAs. Could I please jump on your soapbox for 5 seconds? In TWiV 644, you covered the ChAdOx phase 1-2 trial paper, and there was a little discussion comparing the pseudovirus versus SARS-CoV-2 neutralization assays. They used a lentivirus-based pseudovirus, which seems to be becoming popular because of the convenience of reverse genetics systems for lentis. For listeners who aren't virologists, lentiviruses are a genus of retroviruses that include HIV. We received some other lentiviral reporter pseudoviruses from our collaborators in the U.S. and gives a link. While we're immensely grateful to them for the kind gift, including a lot of other critical reagents, the lenti reporters are not working for us for a very important reason. A lot of people here have HIV and are on antiretroviral medication, including many of our study participants. Our postdoc, who is trying to get the pseudovirus neutralization assay working, has found that it's nuked by plasma from people on antiretroviral medications. Holy cow. So they got the drugs in their blood,
Yeah,
right?
I guess, yeah.
That inhibit the replication of the retrovirus and squash the assay. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Having a working vaccine is going to be...
Wait, you skipped a paragraph.
Sorry. We are going to try and get a hold of reporter pseudoviruses on other backbones, such as VSV, but this may take a while. Personally, I would like to do SARS-CoV-2 micronewts on a few of our samples, as well as to check for correlation with the pseudovirus assay. Having a working vaccine is going to be especially important to immunologically vulnerable people, so I would hope that later trials in phase 3 will seek to recruit some volunteers with HIV. I'm sure they will. I appeal to virologists in the global north to please think about the 38 million people around the world living with HIV and your colleagues who are working in high HIV prevalence countries. If pseudovirus neutralization assays are going to become common or standardized, please don't settle on a backbone that's killed by antiretrovirals. Best regard, Shisia. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, really important to know.
That's amazing. And my understanding from looking at the recruiting, at least for the Moderna trial, which, by the way, shot up its first people in phase 3 2 days ago. So it's underway, is that they are actively recruiting individuals with various and sundry comorbidities, older, immunocompromised in one fashion or another. So this sort of thing is being taken into account. Holy cow. I'm amazed.
We ought to go to VSV Backbone then.
Yeah.
So you could contact at Rockefeller, Binash Hatsuanu, and they have made them, and they will be happy to give them to you. You can find them there. Let's look on the
Once again, for the newbies out there, these involve simply viruses that can be manipulated at BSL-2. We talked about biosafety levels before. So in a fairly normal laboratory that have had engineered into them the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, which is the target of antibodies, so that they can be used for tests that are, if you like, a proxy, mimic virus neutralization, which is what you'd really like to test, and avoid having to do the neutralization of the real article SARS-CoV-2, which requires BSL-3.
All right, C writes, hi TWiV team, it's sunny in 88F here with a 10% chance of rain. Never written in, but I've been listening since 2011 when I began at a little startup that was making a vaccine from CDC technology. It's been almost 10 years since, and our vaccine is almost ready for commercial marketing submission. Just for comparison to some of the well-funded vaccines in development more recently, we have officially been in development for almost 30 years, dating back to the first development work at CDC. Even with better funding lately, as the disease of interest has taken more lives and increased in priority for global health, the development for large-scale manufacturing is complicated, and rushing can cause issues with transfer of knowledge as the development-based manufacturing is transferred to large plants and, importantly, testing sites. Is further complicated by the regulatory landscape, which is diverse and means it is challenging to conduct large-scale manufacturing and testing that suits the needs of all competent authorities in the commercially marketed area of interest and in a timely, strategic manner that is accounting for the seropositivity of the population required for achieving efficacy. For example, trials must be conducted in endemic and non-endemic areas, and the patient population based on the clinical protocol exclusion criteria and informed consent. I could go on and on. This actually leads me, which makes it more amazing that we're where we are already in a phase 3 after 6 months.
And I would point out in this pause that this is why very early on, I mean, this is sort of the background that we came in on, is understanding that ordinarily vaccine development takes decades.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're in a very unusual circumstance, and he's pointing out some of that.
This actually leads me to the reason for my letter today, which is simply that the U.S. military is not an uncommon subject pool for vaccine clinical trials that are approved by the FDA. I will pause. Note she used the word clinical trials. The Chinese story is that it was licensed for the military. That's what we're objecting to. If it's a trial, just call it a trial. Continuing, the military makes for a good subject population for early phase trials due to good adherence to the clinical protocol during the clinical operational requirements. It can be included in the routine vaccination schedule for new recruits, as well as good adherence/reporting by the subject pool. One specific area of use is due to the close quarters of the population, potential to survey both seronegative and positive subjects or subjects which later become seropositive and acquire infection from other circulating strains, for example, with norovirus G1 versus G4, etc. The trickier areas are with respect to informed consent and clinical blinding. The military is a particularly vulnerable population, and so incentive and pressure from authority figures need to be carefully considered, planned, and documented for appropriate informed consent. Another thought on commercialization as it applies to the current environment: when we rapidly scale up the development, especially in the case where there is no defined correlate of protection, i.e. SARS-CoV-2, we risk missing important quality data, which can impact everything from the selection of testing methods for primary endpoints or acceptance criteria in the clinical protocol. For example, quantitative versus qualitative PCR, microlid neutralization with greater than 50% neutralizing antibody titers coupled with exploratory cellular immunity testing, sequences of reversions based on injection date and adverse events reporting. 2, final dosage presentation injection versus microinjection, combination product versus two-barrel auto-injector, and pharmacovigilance surveillance based on method control trending limits and testing time points, from small R&D to large-scale testing to public consumption. Companies link usage with patient history files through apps and other smart collection methods from development through beyond commercialization. The practical significance of the statistical data need to be well understood at each stage, alongside the statistical significance. And issues in understanding or design/planning can ultimately lead to serious results, recalls, or market actions when the product is ultimately brought to market and tested on a much broader population than in clinical trials. For example, see Dengvaxia, if it makes it that far. And that's a story we've talked about on TWiV. The Dengvaxia vaccine, first dengue vaccine, when finally put into many people, showed issues that hadn't been seen before. All right, resuming, when I hear the commitments to making so many doses, it is staggering, but not if you consider that manufacturing sites are making anywhere from 75,000 to 300,000 doses or more for one process qualification run. You need at least 3 consistent runs for most marketing applications, but considering the amount of work that is happening at the same time, the development scientists reformulate and the clinical serology results change boosting use protocol or result release test, and those data need to ultimately be bridged back to the initial clinical filing and process qualification runs, leading to remanufacture. So just because a company is making, quote, phase 3 material does not mean they will be ready for commercial manufacturing, and just because many doses are capable of being made, many of those may not be commercially salable. All of this leads me to be cautious when I hear the estimates of commercial timelines. I've seen a few surges in venture funding that have still not led to commercial product. Not to say we shouldn't keep trying, but more so that we need to increase and consistently fund science in its raw form to enable better understanding of the development of mechanisms of action, processing, and data collection behind the products on which we rely for global health. I'll stop now, as this letter has been much longer than I intended. Keep up the good work always. I love sharing the podcast and the papers you review broadly within my network, and they have even influenced the development of exploratory clinical endpoints in some of our trials. Industry needs to be aware of good, reliable sources of data always, but especially in these times. Thank you. Wonderful letter.
Wonderful
yes,
letter.
we need to do research, and that's why we're in the position we are now, because we didn't do it enough for SARS, like viruses in bats, and that's why we're rushing. So I'm glad to hear that we're useful.
This is a great outline of the hurdles
Yes.
and the issues involved. That's really excellent.
Yeah, spun off from the CDC 10 years ago, almost ready to go forward. And that was based on 30 years of research before that.
People are still working on norovirus vaccines. It's been a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, eventually they probably will be licensed, but in the end, it'll be many, many years.
Norovirus has all sorts of problems when it comes to vaccines.
Noroviruses are a real problem. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Kathy, you're next.
Andrew writes, Tina Kutu Twivin. Hello to you all from New Zealand. I have no idea if I pronounced that right. I didn't try to look it up. Longtime listener here since completing Vincent's virology course a few years ago. I'm a software engineer working in the science arena. You would, of course, all be welcome to come and live in New Zealand, but be aware, although we are practically COVID-19 free, have a mild climate, and are relatively well governed, we also sit on the Pacific Ring of Fire and have a difficult to assess risk of earthquakes and volcanoes.
I can deal with earthquakes and volcanoes. Not a problem.
Having successfully pulled up the drawbridge and isolated the country into a bubble of 5 million people, I'm wondering how you see this working out in the long run, unless a vaccine shows up. Might we see other countries reaching, if not population immunity, at least a plateau equilibrium of infection rates? This would leave New Zealand behind in a type of pre-COVID state, whereby, were I to visit the US, I would be more likely to get an infection or would get one more seriously. I'm curious whether there is a situation in which many people have been exposed to levels of the virus that are too low to create a full infection. Is it possible to develop any kind of immune response that might cause later infections to be handled more swiftly and thus generally damp down in the exposed population? Then would we see more serious infections arising in a naive population? I'm not explaining it well, but I'm imagining an effect such as when the New World populations were first exposed to European diseases. Thanks for your high standard of convivial, erudite conversation. So maybe we'll take those questions and then come back to his PS.
I think there's a problem in New Zealand. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have a vaccine because she's right. Otherwise, when you travel, you're going to get infected because this virus is always going to circulate.
Yeah, I think this idea that that you've kept the virus out, that the virus is gone, that there's, I mean, if you can stay isolated, fine. But in today's world, nobody can stay isolated, and you're going to be exposed eventually. And I don't see where it's going to behave any differently in your population in that it's behaved anywhere else. Okay.
No.
Right.
It's same virus, same people essentially. And so ultimately you're going to have to deal with it. You can deal with it fast or you can deal with it slow. And we'll hope for a vaccine.
And the analogy to the New World populations becoming exposed to smallpox and measles, for example, is spot on. It could be the same thing for the New Zealand population.
But this idea that, you're exposed to a low level and you get it, that doesn't work. We've had a lot of people.
Wishful thinking.
Doesn't work. So basically, if you are willing to keep people out of your country for the next 10 years, you might stay COVID-free, and if you don't want anyone to travel, but that's totally unrealistic, right? So you'll have to do vaccination for sure.
If you can manage to keep it down and keep yourself sufficiently isolated and your economy alive until a vaccine comes along, good on you. Okay. But otherwise, you're going to have to deal with it eventually.
Andrew writes, P.S. When you have a chance to do a non-COVID episode, I would like to hear more about viruses, the kind that don't make you sick. I understand there are many of these and would like to know more about them.
Great.
He will.
I got one for you about a virus that makes you really sick.
We'll get to it for sure.
And he could go to an episode with Marilyn Rusink, right?
Yeah.
About a virus that doesn't make you sick.
Oh, yeah. So, we've done a bunch. Look back in the catalog. That would be cool. All right, Rich.
Eileen writes, Dear TWiV, thank you for all the work you do to help people like me understand more about virology, epidemiology, immunology. A friend of mine from Spain, who's much more informed and credentialed than myself, told me to listen to you, and I started spinning out about the coronavirus in January. I've learned so much from your podcast. Appreciate the work all of you do, and all of you come on your show, especially Dr. Griffin and Dr. Fauci, both of whom I'm huge fans of. I have thus far avoided being infected. However, my friend in Spain unfortunately did not. While he has since recovered, I am a high school teacher outside of Chicago, headed into a schedule of essentially a full face-to-face classroom of students in 2 weeks. While seeing them again does my heart good, every other part of my body, which has any understanding of biology, is incredibly terrified at this prospect. I despise the coronavirus even more because of the position I am now in, along with so many other educators in this fall. I want to pivot away from that and concentrate on what I can control, which is being taught in my classes. What I can control? What is being taught in my classes? I teach biology, genetics, human physiology, and a medical chemistry course. While I have taught a big picture level about the immune system previous to this, I feel like the more I listen to your podcast, the more I realize I am really more unprepared than I originally thought to do so at any level of detail. I want to be able to teach more about the immune system in a more detailed way that works for various levels of students I teach from 14 to 18 years old. Skip down to, therefore, do you have any curriculum or resources that you think can capture the best way to explain immunology in a way that is succinct and simple while connecting it to the coronavirus? I know this probably seems like an oxymoron and ridiculous because from listening to your podcast, I realized that immunology is anything but that, but I feel like what I have been doing in my classes isn't good enough. She references our Virology 101 resources, which, we never finished that.
Yeah.
We had a series of episodes early on that taught Virology 101. So she's looking
I think it got all the way except for like assembly and
we got through translation.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did.
Thanks again, Eileen. She's in Arlington Heights, Illinois, where it's 70 degrees. You got a recommendation here, Kathy?
Well, I have always liked a book by Lauren Somparak, How the Immune System Works. It's now in the 6th edition, and it's written, each chapter is sort of written as a lecture, and it's, I think, really well done. It's just a paperback about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe a little thicker now by the time it's at the 6th edition, but it even includes CAR T-cell therapy. So that might be a starting point. And I think that, so you're teaching students 14 to 18 years old, so upper level high school. I bet that you're not doing as bad a job as you think. You're worried about being underprepared. And I think that you're self-educating by listening to TWiV. You're probably listening to Immune, and get a hold of this book and see if it can give you some ways to approach the teaching with more confidence. But I think you're probably doing a great job.
Yeah, it occurs to me that any of these subjects, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and the more there is to know. And you can get really deep into it and feel like that with your students, you're only scratching the surface, but you have to remember that they're starting from nothing. So even teaching the bare essentials and teaching those in a way that really locks it in for them, and at least piques their curiosity and lets them know kind of what the science is going to be enough. Certainly, the more you do for yourself, the better off you are, so that you can help field some questions. But I agree with Kathy. You're probably doing more than you think you're doing.
All right. Chris wants to know, given the massive spread of SARS-CoV-2, what is the risk of recombination with another coronavirus to produce another novel human virus? For example, this may occur during co-infection of a single host with multiple coronaviruses. And also, is this a concern? Why or why not? Yeah, it is a concern, for sure. Ralph Barrick mentioned this the first time we had him on, way back, February. These viruses are really good at recombination because of the way they make their messenger RNAs. It really makes them very good at recombining, and if you have more than one infecting a cell, that can happen. So yes, it is a concern. We have to be looking out for it, because you could theoretically make a new virus depending on what it recombined with, and that the virus SARS-CoV-2 going into animals expands that, because there are animal coronaviruses with which it could recombine and produce all sorts of things. We really do need pan-coronavirus antivirals and vaccines to deal with this.
And I can't think of any actual examples of this being an issue with human coronaviruses, but it's an understudied realm. And we certainly have plenty of examples of this sort of phenomenon being an issue with polioviruses, right, Vincent?
Oh, well, the SARS-CoV-2 is clearly a recombinant, where the receptor binding domain and the rest of the spike and other parts have come from different bat viruses. Remember, Raul Rabadon told us about that a long time ago, where you can do recombination analysis and see that different pieces of this corona are in bats all throughout China. Okay, you can put them all together to make this. So it's there, it's happening for sure. But yeah, polio also undergoes recombination in your gut. Absolutely. Kathy.
Rich writes, Dear TWiVs, it's 68 Fahrenheit here in Boulder Creek, California, and feels like 78 Fahrenheit on its way to a sunny 87 degrees today, with a hopefully low chance of COVID-19. Masks can block lots of the infectious particles, either as droplets or even aerosolized. If it's true that the dose of the infectious particles that one is exposed to relates to the severity of the disease that one experiences, then the question is whether one should wear a mask at home to limit the impact severity on oneself from exposure to others in the household. I can't imagine doing this, but kind of makes sense to do it. On the TWiV podcast, none of you are wearing masks, but neither do any of you have others in the room. What's your thinking on this? Theoretically, does it make sense to wear a mask at home? And do any of you? P.S. I'm just a retired programmer. Yours maskfully, Rich. Well, first of all, I live by myself, Rich, so it's not an issue. But this is my time to show my newest mask, which
Cool.
I'm showing here. And it's the ASV 2020 logo, which is based on the Colorado flag. ASV 2020 was going to be at Colorado State, and it was designed long before there was a pandemic. And so it has the red C and what was a yellow virus, just a kind of random virus, but it could be a little bit like a coronavirus. And there's a cleft in the mountains that it's either rising or setting by, and that is a specific mountain range near Fort Collins. Anyway, the local host had some of these made recently and sent them to the ASV to distribute to council members. So I don't wear a mask at home. And now, theoretically, having put it on and taken it off, I need to sanitize my hands. Okay. But Rich and Vincent, you can talk about wearing masks at home.
Yeah.
Well, first, I want to address this idea that the dose of infectious particles relates to the severity of the disease, because I'm not sure that's true.
No, but the dose will determine whether you get infected or not. But if there are too few particles in a droplet, you won't get infected. But the severity, there's no evidence for that. No,
right.
You're right.
That's what I thought. So I'm actually probably a pretty good example for this mask thing, a reasonably good example. I can't say what I'm doing is right, but I can tell you what we do. Because our situation is I live together with one other person, my wife, in a small house. And a block away is extended family, my daughter and her husband and 2 children, ages 9 and 12, with whom we would like to interact as much as possible. My wife and I do not wear masks at home. Neither do they as a family. We've all been pretty confined, not really getting out much, curbside pickup for groceries and et cetera. And my daughter and her husband have been working from home. The kids have not been going to any camps or anything like that. So there's very limited exposure with the rest of the population. And for a lot of this time, our interaction with them, we have done outdoors. We have seldom worn masks when we were with each other as the extended family, but most of the time we've been outdoors. Sometimes when none of us have had any exposure to anybody else for a long period of time, we have gathered indoors, not wearing masks. But recently, either my daughter or her husband have been exposed to others in the community, and we've taken extra precautions then, which really sometimes even using masks outdoors. It's semi-random, okay? I think we're probably overcautious, but that's our behavior so far. And there's a big question. So the kids are not going to go back to school immediately, but my daughter is, Texas State is going to do in-person classes, and my daughter is going to be going to work. Okay, so our behavior will probably change when that happens.
This is an important question because household transmission is major,
Yep.
right? That's one of the main ways. And the study we just discussed out of South Korea, they studied household transmission. and it really depends whether you wear a mask at home. I mean, you should if someone is going out and working and facing the public every day and coming home. Either you should be doing something for sure. Now, I'm here with, well, my wife's been away for a few weeks, but she doesn't go anywhere. Our younger son is home from college. He doesn't go anywhere. Our daughter works at Trader Joe's. That worries me because she says she wears a mask, but they're not always careful. So I stay away from her. We don't wear masks at home, but we're physically distant. I haven't hugged her in quite a while because I'm afraid she's going to bring virus in. I think wearing a mask at home is difficult because it's your home. You're supposed to feel safe in your home, right? And it's kind of not right because that's where the transmission occurs. But we don't wear masks. But I do think if you have lots of people in your home and a lot of them are going out and working and coming home, you either have to stay distant, and that's not always possible because people don't have big homes, or wearing a mask is not a bad idea. I know.
My guess is what happens is when my daughter goes back to work, we're going to wind up more distant. My wife and I are going to wind up more distant from them.
Yeah.
Okay. Aside from not getting together at all, the extreme for us has been limiting our interactions to outside and wearing masks.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can imagine that happening again.
Just a retired computer programmer.
You can tell the people who listen.
I think you're next, Rich. Is that correct? Yes.
I don't know. You're the guy who keeps track.
Yes. Rich is next.
Justin writes, I rely on you guys a lot, by the way. That's not Justin. Okay. I do what you tell me to do.
All right.
This is great. Justin writes, hey, TWiV team, I ran across a seemingly plausible article. This is a certain level of peer review. Seemingly plausible. A seemingly plausible article saying that the antidepressant Prozac was found to suppress the replication of SARS-2. Quote from this article. Quote, to test cytotoxicity, Vero cells were incubated with agents for 3 days and then checked for cell growth. After incubating the cells with increasing concentrations of drugs, they were then infected with SARS-CoV-2. The concentrations of fluoxetine were close to the 0.8 microgram per ml dose currently used in the treatment of depression. After 3 days, viral RNA was extracted. Viral replication was quantitated by RT-PCR. The team reports that the 0.8 micrograms per ml dose of fluoxetine was effective at inhibiting SARS-CoV-2 replication. This sounds significant. Is the inference from this experiment to real-world SARS infections sketchy? Can the TWiV team help me and others interested listeners whether Prozac users should take comfort in these results? Best, Justin gives a link to the article. Okay.
It's Vero cells, man. No. As we saw with hydroxychloroquine, that drug inhibits in Vero cells, but not in lung cells where the virus replicates. So this is absolutely uninformative. You need to do this in lung cells. And then who knows where Prozac ends up, if it ends up in the mucosa where it would inhibit viral replication. Prozac was developed to go into the brain, right? So it might not go to the mucosa, and that may be another issue. But right now, Vero cells, I don't care about Vero cells. I think it's ridiculous that people are doing experiments. You could get a cell line, KLU1 or KLU3, their line of human respiratory cells, and there you can do it properly. Why the heck do you use Veros? Why? Because you're not thinking.
There are several levels of research that are done with any given drug. And the absolute first basic screen is some sort of rum dummy cell line like Vero cells, and you should use something better. And the drug, and then you go to small animal models, and then you go to larger animal models, and then maybe you go to humans. Cell culture studies are light years away from anything significant. People shouldn't even talk about this stuff. It certainly shouldn't be in the popular press until you at least have some kind of animal study. And then, as we have always said, mice lie and monkeys exaggerate. So, no.
That's what happens with preprints. We like preprints because it gets it out there early, but stuff like this, which probably will never get published, is out there for people to see.
Right. So this is in bioRxiv, and I'm not sure why Justin wasn't able to access it, because I think bioRxiv is totally open access.
Mm-hmm.
But now when you go to a bioRxiv paper, it says at the top something like, this paper has not yet been peer reviewed. So that's another tip off.
A lesson to students or even experienced researchers. If you want to see if a drug inhibits a virus, use cells that are relevant to infection, please.
And then remember that it's still cells in culture.
There are cells in culture,
in the animal or the person.
And
absolutely. The minute you take cells out of a critter and put them in culture, everything changes because they're out of their normal environment. Not only that, but there's a difference between primary cell culture, where you're taking cells out of the animal and putting them in culture for the first time, not subculturing or anything. That's a real primary culture. There are people who say it's a primary culture, but no, they've been passaged, and within a first couple of passages, everything changes. So I don't even have a whole hell of a lot of faith in continuously cultured cells that are supposed to mimic the tissue of origin. Okay. Yeah. They may, to some extent, they may be closer than Vero cells, but I'm immediately skeptical of any cell culture study.
Well, that's why in one of the hydroxychloroquine papers, they actually used, human air liquid interface cultures, where you can take the cells out of the human airway and culture them in a way that makes them mucosal epithelial cells. And that's doable now. Or you can make organoids from stem cells, which are more like the original cells. Yeah. There's no reason not to do this nowadays. All right, let's do one more from Sue Ellen. I thought I would forward this email from one of our neighbors here in Roswell, Georgia. He's a busy guy, but maybe he would agree to give a quick update on TWiV if you asked him. As you can see, things have gotten pretty bad here in Georgia. The hospital this doctor works at is in an affluent area, so imagine what's happening at places like Grady Memorial. And yeah, we are the state where the governor is suing the mayor of Atlanta because she's mandating masks, and he sees that as an infringement of our liberties. I have to say, I was heartened when I went to the local Kroger yesterday and saw that everyone was wearing masks. Now, Kroger and other businesses have mandated masks, but I was hearing that people were walking in wearing them and then taking them off. Yesterday, there was none of that. People were masked up and being more conscious of personal space than I've seen in the past. So maybe despite our governor, we're getting the message here. And a quick ad. As you guys know, I'm an avid horse person. Well, I've been to 3 horse shows during the past month or so. And I do have to say that they are adhering to the mask rules and managing to keep people safe. This is a big thing because a lot of people rely on horse shows to make a living. Horse trainers, judges, horse show judges, that is. Breeders, etc. It's a big industry, and if you can't get out there and show, you can't really make any money. So I'm proud of our horse folks here in Georgia, who, despite mostly being pretty right-wing, I parked next to a truck yesterday at the show at Chattahoochee Hills that had a decal on the back window saying, "All aboard the Trump train." Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Anyway, despite being pretty far right, they are managing with some grumbling to play by the rules set by our governing bodies and mask up. So maybe there is hope for us after all, but it's going to get worse here before it gets better. Sue Ellen in Roswell, Georgia. So she appends a letter from this ER person. Finished my 7 days in the ICU, figured I would share my observations. Last time I was on service, I was worried that our numbers were growing. That only got worse. And the doc sends a snapshot of the COVID consensus. and you can see it's gone up. We are sitting at 47 patients with 15 in the ICU. 2 days ago, we were at 19. This is a 24-bed unit. Our unit's full, has been full for the last 5 days. Our secondary ICU, which we opened up, is also at capacity with non-COVID patients. We have a COVID floor for non-ICU patients. This is full as well. Hence, we are now having to place COVID patients in floors with non-COVID patients. Last few days were heartbreaking. With a full ICU, we have been on diversion many times. This means that sick people from the community who need an ICU cannot come to our hospital. Ambulances have to go somewhere else. Instead of focusing on the very sick people in my unit, I had to go to the floors and manage patients there without all the ICU resources because I don't have beds to bring them down to me. Most COVID patients are spending 7 to 12 days in the unit compared to 2 to 5 for an average flu or pneumonia. This means we have a hard time making room for more patients. We lost 4 lives to COVID in the ICU this week, 4 lives too many. Our nurses are tired, overworked, asked to pick up shifts on their day off. They're being tripled. This means instead of 1 nurse for every 2 patients, the ratio is 1 to 3. Ages range from 27 to 80s. Younger folks are not less sick. Some younger folks are incredibly sick. We are short supply in the hospital, short on remdesivir. The blood bank is low on convalescent plasmid. If you know someone who has recovered, encourage them to donate blood. Please know that our medical team is working hard to help those who reach us, but we need lots of help reducing the amount of folks who do. We feel we're running out of ways to care for those in need. Please wear a mask. Okay.
Thank you for that, because I think too many people are too distant from this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the part of I was thinking about this today. I don't have anybody in my direct circle of friends or relatives who's been sick. Okay, and I think most people are in the same boat. So it's real easy to think that this is just like not happening. Okay. And it's important to have this sort of testimonial about this is serious business, and people, and it's impacting even people who are not sick with COVID. Okay. Because they don't get the health care they need because we're dealing with the pandemic.
All right. That'll do it. I have to go, guys. So I'm sorry about your picks.
I can do them really fast.
Okay, do some picks.
Okay. So Dixon has a Wall Street Journal article about vertical farms, and it's paywalled, but write to any of us and we'll send you a copy. Basically, it describes how skyscrapers that are going to be empty could be used now for vertical farming. Today's astronomy picture of the day is gorgeous. It's the giants of summer, Jupiter and Saturn, and has links to really good photos of Comet Neowise. And 2 listener picks, besides the Racine firefighter story that Christiana told about, she sent a German video about Christian Drosten with a ZSK band. The name of the band is ZSK. It's a really good animated YouTube. And then a listener pick from John Udell, who's been on the show before. Turns out that nuclear dangers are keeping him up, so he sent a link to a Sam Harris free episode of Making Sense podcast. This is an interview with William Perry and his millennial granddaughter. And it is really scary when you listen to this. It's like the rich is being kept at night by climate change. A lot of people are kept up by the coronavirus, but this nuclear story is also very sobering.
Cool. Rich, you have a pick too?
Yeah, Kathy gave it to me. She gets the credit, okay? Which is really high resolution pictures of Mars from all of the various rovers. Okay, they're really very cool. As a matter of fact, stick around because it follows through with another video that shows the whole journey of one of the rovers narrated. It's great stuff.
All right. Last time I forgot to put the picks in. I have to remember to do that today. All right. That's TWiV 647 microbe.tv/TWiV. Questions or comments, TWiV at microbe.tv. Contributions to help support our work. microbe.tv/contribute. Kathy Spindler is at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks. This is a lot of fun.
Rich Condit is an emeritus professor, University of Florida, Gainesville, currently residing in Austin, Texas. Thank you, Rich.
Sure enough, always a good time.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.blog. I'd like to thank the American Society for Virology and the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiV, and Ronald Jenkins for the music. This episode of TWiV was recorded, edited, and posted by me, Vincent Racaniello. You've been listening to This Week in Virology. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Another TWiV is viral.